Have you ever wondered why certain traders move through the markets like silent predators, striking with precision while others stumble in hesitation? The story of Stanley Druckenmiller is not merely one of financial triumph, but of an instinct honed to sense weakness in the herd, an opportunity in the shadows. He was not just watching prices rise and fall, he was listening to the heartbeat of the market, a primal rhythm that most cannot hear because they are too distracted by the noise of their own fear. Imagine this: the lion does not chase every antelope. It waits, patient, poised, conserving energy until the one vulnerable target reveals itself. Druckenmiller embodied this archetype of predator instinct. He understood that success does not come from endless motion, but from waiting with discipline until the moment to pounce is undeniable. Most traders live in a battlefield of chaos. They chase after every flicker of movement, consumed by the fear of missing out. They treat the market like an endless buffet, filling themselves with scraps instead of waiting for the feast. But the predator archetype, the one Druckenmiller carried, knows restraint. It knows that hunger is not satisfied by chasing everything. It is satisfied by striking once with force, when the prey has no escape. You, the one listening, must ask yourself, do you behave like the predator, or like the desperate scavenger who clutches at bones? When your hands tremble on the mouse, when your eyes dart between charts as if the numbers themselves will rescue you, what voice are you obeying? The disciplined hunter, or the starving shadow within? The predator instinct is not merely aggression, it is presence. Druckenmiller could sit for weeks, appearing idle, but inside him was a sharpened patience, attention held like a bowstring. Most traders cannot bear the silence of waiting. They fill the emptiness with trades, with noise, with constant action that soothes the ego but drains the account. Have you noticed this within yourself? That subtle itch to do something, anything, rather than nothing? It is the ego way of hiding its fear of stillness. But the predator archetype thrives in stillness. It uses time as a weapon. When the opportunity comes, it strikes with such commitment that hesitation has no space to breathe. Yet the predator instinct also carries a shadow. Within Druckenmiller was the same battle that resides in every trader, the tension between overconfidence and terror. The predator who tastes blood too often begins to believe it cannot fail. Many times in his career, Druckenmiller admitted that greed and hubris nearly consumed him. Jung would call this the inflation of the ego, the illusion that one has become more than human, beyond consequence. In that shadow, the predator transforms into the hunted, blind to traps. Have you felt this swelling within yourself, after a string of wins? That whisper that tells you the rules no longer apply to you, that you have transcended risk itself. That whisper is the most dangerous prey of all, for it hides within your own mind. To embody the predator instinct, as Druckenmiller did, is to walk a razor edge between vigilance and arrogance, patience and paralysis. It is not an easy archetype to hold. It requires a discipline that borders on asceticism. Imagine a Stoic philosopher, perhaps Marcus Aurelius, sitting in silence, reminding himself that victory today does not guarantee victory tomorrow. The predator does not boast after the hunt. It returns to stillness, licking its wounds, regaining its strength. Druckenmiller understood that the market is an endless savanna, always shifting, always concealing new prey and new predators. To survive is to remain humble even in triumph, and alert even in despair. And you, standing before your screen, must confront this truth. Do you act from instinct sharpened by discipline, or do you lash out from hunger and fear? The charts you stare at are not merely lines and candles, they are mirrors. Each tick reveals not just the market movement, but your own. Do you wait with predator calm, or do you reveal yourself as prey, running in circles until exhaustion consumes you? Druckenmiller's gift was not some mystical foresight. It was the ability to see the reflection of his own mind in the market and to master it before it betrayed him. This is the alchemy of trading: to turn raw impulse into sharpened instinct, to transmute chaos into clarity. In the end, predator instinct is less about the external strike and more about the internal hunt. The prey is not only the vulnerable trade in the market, it is also the shadows of your own psyche, greed, arrogance, despair. When Druckenmiller stalked the markets, he was also stalking himself, confronting the inner beasts that sought to sabotage him. This is why he endured when others fell, because he hunted both without and within. And the question that lingers is simple, yet brutal. Will you do the same? There is a moment in every trader journey when the silence between trades feels unbearable, like standing in a vast desert with no wind, no sound, only the echo of your own heartbeat. For most, this silence becomes torment, and they rush into action to fill the void. But for Stanley Druckenmiller, that silence was not emptiness, it was preparation. He understood that markets are oceans, and within oceans, predators survive not by thrashing in panic, but by conserving energy, waiting for the right current, the right swell, the right moment to devour. To wait without hunger consuming you, to endure the stillness without giving in to fear, that is the essence of the predator instinct. You may feel it in your bones, the pull to enter, to act, to force the market to yield. But do you have the strength to let silence sharpen you instead? The archetype of the predator does not emerge from comfort. It is born in struggle, in long nights, staring at screens, in the agony of loss, in the intoxication of victory that quickly fades into regret. Druckenmiller himself admitted that his greatest failures came not from ignorance but from abandoning discipline. It is here that Jung's shadow becomes most alive, the inner saboteur, the hidden impulse that whispers just this once. When discipline begins to ache, every trader has faced this whisper. Perhaps you recognize it: the sudden surge of confidence after a win, or the desperate urge to recover after a loss. These are not market forces. They are shadows lurking in your unconscious, waiting for the moment when vigilance slips. And when you obey them, the predator becomes prey. Imagine yourself on a battlefield. Arrows fly, swords clash, dust rises in clouds. The instinct is to run into the chaos, to swing wildly, to prove you belong. But the true warrior does not rush. He studies the rhythm of battle, waits for the opening, and strikes when certainty outweighs noise. Druckenmiller wielded patience like a weapon. He knew that missing 100 opportunities meant nothing if the 101st was seized with full commitment. This is where most traders break. They fear the absence of action more than they fear defeat. They would rather lose while doing something than endure the discomfort of restraint. But the predator instinct flips this equation. The fear of losing is replaced by the fear of acting without clarity. Do you feel this inversion within yourself, or does the hunger to act still drive you into reckless hunts? Seneca once wrote that it is not the man who has little, but the man who desires more, who is poor. Translate this into the language of markets. It is not the trader with few trades, but the trader who cannot stop trading, who is weak. Druckenmiller's genius was not his access to information or his network of mentors, but his ability to act with ferocity when the stars aligned, and to remain motionless when they did not. He could unleash billions in a single stroke, yet sit quietly with no position when nothing called to him. This duality, ruthless aggression coupled with ascetic restraint, is the paradox of the predator archetype. Can you live in this paradox, or do you swing helplessly between greed and paralysis? But beware, for the predator instinct carries its own dangers. The moment you begin to believe you are invincible, the moment you taste too much blood, the shadow of overconfidence descends. Druckenmiller's own words reveal this battle. After extraordinary successes, he would often overstep, driven by the belief that his instinct was flawless. These moments humbled him, stripping away the illusion of invulnerability. In this humility lies a lesson for you. The predator must never mistake the hunt for ownership of the jungle. The market does not belong to you. It merely offers you fleeting chances. Have you noticed how quickly triumph transforms into arrogance? How easily discipline dissolves when you feel untouchable? That is the shadow creeping in, eager to drag you back into blindness. In Jungian language, the predator instinct is an archetype of the self confronting the chaos of the unconscious. To embody it is to walk into the forest of your psyche with sharpened senses, to see not only the prey outside, but also the wolves inside. Druckenmiller's discipline was not perfection, it was the continual act of facing these wolves, of slaying the urge to chase shadows, of returning again and again to the silence of waiting. And this is where the Stoic wisdom fuses with Jungian insight. Control is not over the market, but over the self. The wind will blow, the prey will move, the world will shift. You have no mastery over these, but you can master your hunger, your fear, your arrogance. That is the only dominion you truly hold. So when you sit before your screen tomorrow, ask yourself, are you the predator waiting in tall grass, patient, disciplined, unseen? Or are you the desperate hunter running blindly, exhausting yourself before the true prey arrives? The answer lies not in the market, but in the silence you carry within. Druckenmiller's legacy is not simply profited, is the embodiment of this silence, sharpened into instinct, waiting until the moment comes when the strike is undeniable and the reward justifies the risk. The market is not conquered by noise, but by those who can endure its silence until the prey reveals itself. There is a hidden truth that only those who survive long enough in the markets begin to understand. The enemy is not the market. The enemy is the untrained mind that cannot distinguish illusion from reality. Stanley Druckenmiller, Predator Instinct, was not born from staring at charts until his eyes burned. It was forged by confronting his own illusions and stripping them away. He knew that every flicker of a candle, every headline flashing across the screen, was bait set by the market to ensnare the impatient. To trade successfully is to see through the bait and sense the deeper rhythm beneath. Most never learn this. They chase mirages, consumed by the shadow of their own fear, and in doing so they become prey to forces they cannot name. Have you ever felt this yourself, that irresistible pull toward a setup that you knew, deep inside, was nothing but noise? That is the shadow masquerading as opportunity. The predator instinct thrives on clarity, but clarity is not given freely. It is purchased with discipline, patience, and the sacrifice of impulse. Druckenmiller once said that he could always tell when he was in trouble. It was when he was trading out of boredom. The moment he entered positions simply to fill the emptiness, he was already defeated. This is the lesson too few traders absorb. The market is not a playground, it is a battlefield. To enter without purpose is to walk into the line of fire without armor. How many times have you done this: placed a trade because you were restless, because silence felt like suffocation, because you mistook action for progress? Each of those trades was not against the market, but against yourself, a duel you could never win. The archetype of the predator is inseparable from the archetype of death. To wait with patience is to kill impatience. To strike with full commitment is to kill hesitation. To withdraw when the hunt is unwise is to kill pride. Druckenmiller carried within him this archetypal dance of death and rebirth, pruning away the illusions that most traders protect. Jung would describe this as individuation, the process of facing the unconscious, accepting the shadow, and emerging whole. In Druckenmiller world, individuation was not philosophy, but survival. Each loss revealed another piece of his shadow, another weakness that needed to be confronted. And with each confrontation, the predator instinct grew sharper, less burdened by fear, more attuned to the truth beneath the surface. But the predator instinct is not only about patience and clarity, it is also about magnitude. Druckenmiller had the rare courage to bet not only decisively, but massively when the opportunity revealed itself. This was not recklessness, though many misunderstood it as such. It was the discipline of waiting sharpened into explosive force. When the prey revealed itself, he struck with everything, knowing that hesitation was the enemy of predators. Think about your own trading. Do you dilute your edge with timid positions, afraid of being wrong? Or do you commit fully when the moment truly comes? Fear often whispers to scale small, to nibble rather than devour, to hedge every decision until nothing meaningful remains. But the predator instinct demands that once clarity has revealed itself, hesitation must die. This is what separates the survivor from the scavenger. And yet, even with this instinct, Druckenmiller was haunted by his own shadow. He admitted that arrogance after success often lured him into reckless positions. Here lies another paradox. The predator, once victorious, risks believing that the jungle belongs to him. But the jungle is indifferent. The market has no memory of your triumphs, no mercy for your pride. It strips the arrogant with the same brutality it strips the weak. Have you ever felt this shift within yourself? The way a winning streak inflates the ego, the way confidence mutates into delusion, the way discipline becomes a distant whisper drowned by the roar of imagined invincibility. That is the moment when the hunter becomes prey. Druckenmiller learned, often painfully, that victory carries its own poison. To hold the predator instinct is therefore to walk a narrow path. It requires the humility of a monk and the ferocity of a warrior. It demands that you embody both stillness and violence, that you wait without hunger and strike without mercy. This balance is not natural to the human psyche. The human psyche wants comfort, wants validation, wants constant feedback that it is alive and engaged. But trading is not about comfort. It is about enduring discomfort until the true moment arises. Druckenmiller trained himself to withstand this tension, and in doing so, he transcended the ordinary cycle of traders who burned themselves out, chasing shadows. You, too, stand at this crossroads every time you open your platform. The voices within you, fear, greed, boredom, arrogance, are all predators in their own right, waiting to devour your clarity. To master them is the first hunt. To strike with discipline, patience, and magnitude when clarity appears is the second. Druckenmiller's legacy is not merely that he made billions, it is that he embodied this archetype so fully that his very presence in the market shifted the balance of power. The question is not whether you can replicate his trades. The question is whether you can replicate his psychology, his predator instinct, his relentless confrontation with the shadow. For until you do, you remain prey, no matter how many charts you read. There is a fire that burns within every trader, a restless hunger to dominate the market, to bend its will to personal desire. Most attempt to feed this fire recklessly, throwing every trade into its flames, hoping that enough wins will quench the insatiable appetite. But Stanley Druckenmiller knew that this fire could never be extinguished by random victories. It could only be tamed, disciplined, and forged into a weapon. The predator instinct is the transformation of raw hunger into controlled fury. It is the alchemy of turning restless desire into sharpened precision. To the untrained, this fire consumes. To the predator, it illuminates. The difference lies not in the market, but in the mastery of the inner flame. Druckenmiller's mind was a crucible where fear and greed collided daily. He understood that the market was not external chaos, it was a mirror reflecting the chaos within. Each sudden spike of adrenaline when a position moved against him, each surge of euphoria when a trade exploded in his favor, was a test of his relationship with his own psyche. Jung would call this the confrontation with the shadow, where unconscious drives rise to the surface in disguise. The market simply magnifies them. What appears as volatility outside is volatility within, and unless you master it, you remain chained to its rhythm. Think back to your own trades. How many were ruined not by poor analysis but by poor control of the inner world? Fear, forcing an exit too early. Greed, demanding entry too soon. Pride, refusing to cut a loss. Each mistake was not about the market. It was about the predator within you, failing to conquer the prey of your own emotions. The predator instinct demands that you become both observer and warrior. Druckenmiller was ruthless in his ability to detach from the crowd. He did not follow the herd panic nor its ecstasy. He studied the herd, sensed its weakness, and struck where it was blind. Most traders cannot do this because they are still part of the herd themselves, carried away by the very emotions they are supposed to exploit. You must ask yourself honestly, when the market surges and collapses, are you the one being observed, or the one observing? The predator is invisible, concealed, patient, watching others reveal their fear before acting. To embody this is to detach from the madness of the crowd, to transform from participant into hunter. And yet, how many times have you been swept into that madness, trading not because you saw clarity, but because everyone else seemed to be moving? That is not predator instinct, that is herd instinct, and it is the death of discipline. Stoic philosophy tells us that we control only our thoughts, not external events. The market, like life, is beyond our control. What we hold is the power to respond, to master our own impulses, to shape our perception. Druckenmiller embodied this stoic resilience. When wrong, he did not cling stubbornly to illusion. He cut quickly, admitting error without shame, because he understood that attachment to being right was poison. Most traders fail here. They cling to losing positions because their ego cannot endure the wound of being wrong. They confuse their self-worth with their trade, and in doing so, they become enslaved to outcomes. Have you felt this enslavement yourself? That tightening in the chest as a position sinks, not because of the loss itself, but because of what it says about you. The predator instinct requires you to kill this illusion. You are not your trade. You are not your win or your loss. You are the discipline that survives beyond them. But the path of the predator is not called attachment alone. It is also intensity, the courage to strike with ferocity when the opening emerges. Druckenmiller did not hesitate to bet heavily when conviction was undeniable. This is what frightened many who observed him, his willingness to commit fully, to unleash enormous capital when the moment demanded. Yet this was not recklessness. It was alignment. He had endured the silence, confronted his shadows, waited until clarity was blinding. When that moment came, hesitation was impossible. This is the paradox you must learn to hold, to wait with patience longer than you think possible, and then to act with force greater than you think safe. Most fail because they reverse this order. They act with reckless force when patience was needed, and hesitate timidly when conviction should have roared. Which pattern do you fall into? Are you the predator waiting for inevitability, or the prey rushing into traps? In the end, predator instinct is not about constant winning. It is about surviving long enough to wait for the prey that matters. Druckenmiller survived because he accepted the losses that came from discipline, not from ego. He understood that the jungle of markets punishes those who confuse action with progress. The predator archetype demands that you embrace discomfort, endure emptiness, and remain invisible until the moment arrives. And when it does, you must become the storm. The fire within you is both your greatest threat and your greatest ally. Master it, and it becomes light. Neglect it, and it devours you whole. Druckenmiller life was a testament to this truth, that trading is not the conquest of the market, but the conquest of the self. There comes a moment when every redditor faces the ultimate truth. Survival is not about endless conquest, but about knowing when to disappear, when to retreat into the shadows, when to admit that the hunt has ended for now. Stanley Druckenmiller lived this truth repeatedly. He learned that markets are not tamed, they are endured. They are storms that cannot be silenced, only navigated. The predator instinct, refined through years of battle, becomes not a weapon for domination, but a shield for preservation. To endure is to accept that every strike has its cost, every hunt its exhaustion, and every victory its hidden poison. How many traders collapse, not from losses, but from victories that led to arrogance, from triumphs that disguise their own fragility. The true predator survives not because it always wins, but because it knows when to withdraw, when to rest, when to let silence become its sanctuary again. Imagine this: you are standing at the edge of a cliff, watching a storm unfold over the sea. Lightning cracks the horizon, winds howl, waves crash violently below. Most who see this storm feel terror, a desire to run, to hide, to escape. But the predator does not flee from the storm. It studies the rhythm of the waves, the timing of the lightning, the pattern of the winds. It knows that even in chaos, there is order. Druckenmiller embodied this awareness. He saw in the chaos of markets not random violence, but repeating patterns of fear and greed. He trained himself to ride those storms without demanding that they calm. Can you say the same? Or do you find yourself wishing the market would behave, would finally obey your expectations, would reward your desires? That wish is the voice of prey. The predator instinct abandons wishes and clings only to observation, patience, and precision. Jung spoke of individuation as the integration of shadow into self, the wholeness that arises when light and darkness are reconciled. Druckenmiller predator instinct was this individuation in motion. He did not deny his greed, he sharpened it. He did not deny his fear, he tamed it. He did not deny his arrogance, he humbled it. Each shadow became a tool, a reminder, a lesson. The trader who denies his shadow is consumed by it. The trader who confronts it gains strength beyond calculation. This is why Druckenmiller could strike with billions, yet still admit error with humility. He did not need to be right, he needed only to survive. Do you see the difference? The ego demands to be right. The predator demands only to endure and to grow sharper with each cycle of hunt and retreat. Stoic wisdom echoes this lesson. Epictetus wrote that freedom is not achieved by fulfilling desires, but by removing the need for them. Druckenmiller's greatest victories came when he detached himself from the need to trade, the need to win constantly, the need to prove himself to others. He waited until the signal was undeniable, until clarity pierced through the fog, and then he acted. This detachment freed him. And yet, even he stumbled when attachment to victory crept back in. His shadow pulled him toward overconfidence, and he paid the price. But each fall was not the end, it was a rebirth. He rose from those mistakes with sharper awareness, greater humility, and renewed clarity. This is the cycle you too must embrace. Trading is not a straight ascent. It is death and rebirth, fire and ash, silence and storm. To endure is to accept this rhythm as the law of the jungle.